Conditions for performing Friday prayer 196. There are 6 conditions for performing Friday prayer. 1. Friday prayer must be led by the local authority or a person designated by him. That is to say, the Friday prayer must be led by the highest-ranking local authority or by another person with his permission. In a place where there is no administrator or person appointed by him, a member of the Muslim community may lead the Friday prayer upon the community's designation. In places where Islamic laws are not enforced, such as Dar al-Harb, Friday prayer is performed in this manner. 2. Permission to deliver the sermon also constitutes permission to lead the prayer. The same applies in the opposite case. A person authorized to perform both of these duties may appoint another in his place. Whether or not he has a valid excuse, he may do so even if nitrogen monoxide authority has been granted to him to appoint another. However, it is not permissible for another person to perform the duty of the khatib without permission in the presence of the khatib. 2. General permission. Muslims must have been granted permission by the authorities to gather at a specific location to perform the Friday prayer. It is not permissible to perform Friday prayer in places designated specifically for certain individuals and whose doors are closed to others. However, if the door of the mosque is left open and people are allowed to enter, then the Friday prayers are valid even if nitrogen monoxide one else has come. 3. The time must still be in progress. That is to say, the time for Friday prayer must still be ongoing. Once this time has passed, it is no longer permissible to perform or make up the Friday prayer. If the noon prayer for that day has also not been performed, then only that prayer must be made up. If the time for Friday prayer is about to expire while it is still being performed, one must perform the noon prayer as a make-up prayer. According to Imam Malik, the Friday prayer may also be performed after the noon time has passed. According to a narration from Imam Ahmad, Friday prayer may also be performed before the time of Zuhr. 4. The presence of a congregation. Specifically, the minimum number of people required for Friday prayer, besides the Imam, is 3. According to Imam Abu Yusuf, it is 2 people besides the Imam. According to a narration from Imam Malik, it is 30. According to the schools of Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad, it is 40. According to Imam al-Azam, it is also a condition that the congregation be of sound mind and male, and that at least these 3 people be present until the first prostration. Accordingly, Friday prayer cannot be performed with a congregation consisting solely of women or children, or with a congregation that disbanded before the first prostration and remained in the minority. According to 2 Imams, the congregation's presence is a condition until the Tahrima. According to Imam Zufar, the congregation must be present at least until the duration of the Tashahhud during the sitting Qada. If the congregation disperses before this, the remaining 1 or 2 people must perform the noon prayer. It is not a condition that the congregation be residents or free people. Thus, a Muslim who is a guest or a slave may lead the Friday prayer. 5. It is obligatory to deliver a sermon before the obligatory Friday prayer. That is to say, after the time for prayer has entered, a sermon must be delivered in the presence of the congregation. For this reason, if the congregation is not present when the sermon is delivered but will join the prayer later, their prayer will not be valid. God is not a requirement for the congregation to hear the sermon. Their mere presence is sufficient. It is considered sufficient for a responsible man to be present during the sermon, even if he is a guest. According to Imam al-Azam, the essence of the Friday sermon consists of remembering Allah. Therefore, if one intends to deliver the sermon and says only Alhamdulillah or Subhanallah or ILAHA ILLALLAH, that is sufficient. According to 2 Imams, Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad, the sermon consists of a sufficiently lengthy remembrance of Allah. The minimum requirement for this is the amount of praise and blessings equivalent to the Tashahhud, along with supplication for the Muslims. The sunnahs of the sermon also include dividing the sermon into 2 parts and sitting for a period. long enough to recite one tasbih or 3 verses between them. For this reason, it is called the 2 sermons. Each of these 2 sermons must include praise of Allah, the Shahada, and the Salawat. The first sermon should consist of reciting a verse and offering advice to the people, while the second sermon should include supplication for the Muslims. Additionally, the Imam's voice should be softer during the second sermon than during the first. These are among the sunnah practices of the sermon. It is also sunnah not to prolong either of the 2 sermons. In fact, reading the sermon at length from any of the surahs between Surah al-Hujurat and Surah al-Buraj is disliked, especially during the winter season. It is inappropriate to bore the congregation. The congregation may have urgent matters to attend to. Keeping them in the mosque for too long is an unnecessary act, as it may prevent them from continuing to attend Friday prayers. The preacher should keep these things in mind. The sermon should not be so long that its conclusion causes the congregation to forget or disregard the previous words. Preparing a short sermon in a manner beneficial to the congregation is a sign of the preacher's competence and virtue. The meaning of a hadith on this subject is as follows. A long prayer and a short sermon are signs that a person is a wise scholar of religion. So, extend your prayer in a way that does not burn the congregation and deliver the sermon briefly. Truly, some were, according to a narration from the companions, specifically Jabir ibn Samura, the Prophet's prayer and sermon were of moderate length, neither too short nor too long. The preacher sits on the pulpit until the call to prayer is completed. Then he stands up. Then, after silently reciting Audu, he openly praises and glorifies Allah. He delivers his sermon facing the congregation. In a city conquered by war, the preacher delivers his sermon, leaning on a sword held in his left hand. This reminds people of Islam's strength and the power upon which Islamic warriors rely. It enhances the nation's heroism. After the sermon, the ikamat is performed. These are also part of the sunnah of the sermon. It is disliked, makruh, for the preacher to neglect the sunnahs of the sermon or to engage in worldly conversations. 6. It is the performance of the Friday prayer in a town or a place considered equivalent to a town. A town refers to any city that has a governor, a judge, roads, and neighborhoods, places adjacent to this town that have been designated for the town's needs, such as recruiting soldiers, tying up horses, firing weapons, performing funeral prayers, and burying the dead are also considered part of the town. These places are called Fina-i Beld. Therefore, just as Friday prayers can be performed in the mosques of a town, they can also be performed in such places. In the past, there were such prayer sites, musalla, outside the cities. People would gather there on Fridays and holidays to perform their prayers. In this way, they sought to demonstrate their unity, strength, and commitment to the truth. In fact, according to Imam Azam, Friday prayers performed in only one mosque or one musalla in a town. It is not performed in multiple mosques, however. According to another narration from Imam Muhammad and Imam Azam, Friday prayer may be performed in many mosques within a single town. This is the correct view, and it is practiced in this manner. According to a narration from Imam Abu Yusuf, Friday prayer may be performed in only 2 locations within a city. According to another narration, Friday prayer may not be performed in 2 locations unless there is a river between them. According to those who do not consider it permissible to perform Friday prayer in multiple mosques. In a town where multiple Friday prayers are held, the prayer in which the takbir was recited first is valid, while the others are not. It is precisely to avoid such a disagreement that, after the 4 rak'ah sunnah prayer of Friday, an additional 4 rak'ah prayer, known as Zari Ar, is performed. Specifically, the intention is made as follows: for the final noon prayer that I have caught in time and has not yet lapsed, and 4 rak'ahs of prayer are performed, similar to the 4 obligatory rak'ahs or the 4 sunnah rak'ahs of the full noon prayer. it is better to perform it as a sunnah prayer. Because if the Friday prayer is not valid, these 4 rakats will have served as that day's noon prayer. The surah or verses added to the last 2 rakats of this prayer do not invalidate the obligatory prayer. If the Friday prayer is valid, these 4 rakats substitute for a missed noon prayer. If nitrogen monoxide such missed prayer exists, it becomes a voluntary prayer. Conclusion: since performing prayer in this manner is in accordance with the principle of caution, it has been deemed appropriate by most scholars. Many Shafi'i scholars also consider this to be appropriate, for according to Imam Shafi'i, the first Friday prayer performed in a town is valid, while other Friday prayers are not. Therefore, those who began the Friday prayer later must perform the noon prayer. However, since this practice is a matter of jurisprudential opinion, Imam Shafi'i